Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Confoes. I'm your host, Diego, together with my co host, Sean-Luc. Sean-Luc, welcome back.
Feels good to be back. It feels good to hear the music, and it feels interesting to see the changes going on. Like I mentioned, I have some big changes coming up in the next 3 months, but hopefully we'll see that through the coming episodes. But for the rest, I think I have a better lighting setup than the last time. There's a lot of backlight, but I'll leave it at that. And yeah, again, it's good to be back
With
talking
that being,
about a
yeah,
topic
with that.
that's.
But
Go
before we
ahead.
go into the topic, quick announcements. Don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/confoes. Like our videos, check out the different playlists in every year. So we have different playlists as well now. Subscribe to our newsletter on Substack, confoes.substack.com. There's a new newsletter in the work, so that's going to be hitting your inbox quite soon. So if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe at confoes.substack.com, and also follow us on Instagram for just some tidbits and snippets. And of course, if you're feeling generous, we also have a QR code that you could scan if you want to give us a tip or just learn the ways of the things that we are doing behind the scene. Scan the QR code. With that being said, today's topic is about technicalities. You made me write that in a very specific way, Jean-Luc. What
Yeah.
are we talking about today?
Okay, so
Technicalities.
first is the tech side. So let's talk about the tech side. For people that are listening in, so people that are actually listening to this as a podcast, not watching this, the QR code, is it somewhere else written down for those who are streaming this on audio only platform?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So if you can't scan the QR code, you can also go to pay.confoes.com. That's pay dot confoes.com. That's pay.confoes.com. So if you go there, you'll be redirected to the same link as the QR code.
Okay, interesting. So then we get to the real question on what technicalities are. And yeah, basically, there's a lot going on in the tech space. You're more technical than I am, for sure. There's a lot of things that are happening in the tech space. We have covered Bitcoin, we have covered Web3, NFTs, and there seems to always be
AI, you forgot the most recent
AI,
type. Yeah.
AI, yes. There's always some tech behind it, but there are also some technicalities behind it, as in a certain control from a certain group which kind of decides everything within the world. And if you're on their good side, they will do everything to protect you. And if you're on their bad side, they will do everything to leave you out. Does that cover it basically?
Yeah, kind of. So I think the first thing we could highlight is if you look at the news today, if you and today being November 21st, 2023, if you opened up X, previously known as
I
Twitter,
refuse. No, I refuse. I'm saying Twitter. If you open up Twitter, yeah.
Reddit, basically where you get your news, quick news, all the tech news outlets, Medium, TechCrunch, they've been putting out headlines about Sam Altman. If you don't know who Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, and OpenAI is the basically the platform or the company behind ChatGPT, which I think many people are familiar with now. And they basically, the board of directors kind of removed him from his position as CEO like quite abruptly over the weekend. And that's been going around the news media outlets now. Why that happened, it's kind of unclear for me, at least. There's been different angles. And to your point, being controlled by a certain group of people, if you look at the who's in the board, the people backing OpenAI, because basically OpenAI previously was just a research facility, basically doing research on artificial intelligence, and they had kind of funding, etc. But with the kind of success that ChatGPT has gotten and the major adoption it has had over the past 2 years and developments it has had, it kind of became mainstream as to the regular person, retail people like us using it. And this kind of have had them develop a business model, like a true business, like a for-profit business. And I think that's where the tensions have been created, like being a research academic purpose driven uh, organization versus being a commercially driven organization that kind of needs to meet shareholders, investors expectations. So that's kind of how I've seen see the stage being set for open AI and kind of what's occurring now. Any thoughts on that, Jean-Luc?
Okay, so the first question that I have is one of the things that's going around on Twitter, again, refusing to call it X, is
X gonna
that,
give it to you.
yeah, the new CEO, Emma Shear, will quit OpenAI if the board can't provide evidence on why they fired Sam.
Yeah.
So how does that fit into the whole story?
So what's actually even more, I'd say, amazing is that not just the interim CEO, but like the majority of employees at OpenAI kind of went into protest or are kind of resigning as well, or making their well known to resign if they do not, provide evidence or reinstate Sam. Kind of even Microsoft, Satya Nadella, already jumped on the bandwagon and offered like the majority of them positions to kind of develop their AI technology in house in Microsoft. If you know, like Bing already partnered with OpenAI like the past few months and kind of released their companion in the new Edge browser. And if they have that, the developers in house now, because a lot of the stuff they built are already on Microsoft services. So kind of they're bringing
I
it
have
in
to
house now.
say, using Edge as a browser for me kind of triggers a red flag, but it just proves how much uh, people underestimate the role of a leader and somebody that's being liked, how important that is. I think that's probably one of the things that is being underestimated by these boards. I think that's really something that is being underrated. But you just made a statement a while back on what it kind of means for the developments as well. How do you look at the the tension between giving stuff that's available for free and the commercial side of things?
So in this, I'm gonna try to zoom in on this particular example and then kind of abstracate it to some my general thoughts. In this example, if Microsoft takes over, whereas Microsoft is already a for-profit company, billions in I think they're already over a trillion in market valuation, would mean that the democratization and open sourcing of the technology kind of goes behind a closed wall again, like behind a private company. And it's basically being monopolized in that way. So they get extra control. Whereas OpenAI, before the boom of ChatGPT and getting that thing, was the goal was to do research and make it publicly available so that the development of the technology as a industry could benefit from it. And then it became commercialized because you get investors, because Microsoft poured billions into OpenAI as well as a shareholder. So coming back to the thoughts of one company monopolizing, we mentioned at the beginning, a private group of people, elite club of people with money, influence, and power. kind of control everything that's happening. And if you do a quick review on who's in the board of the open AI, you see people with kind of associations that you think, what are they doing there? Aren't they from a competitor? Because you also have Adam D'Angelo from Quora, the founder of Quora, who was also kind of developing a, I would say, competitor kind of platform. So you start to think, was it conflict of interest? Was it kind of a divide and conquer play to um, destabilize that, or was it just a thing to decelerate the development of the technology? Because there's also a lot of people saying like AI is developing too fast and we need to put in rules and regulations before it gets out of control. So maybe not accelerate the development but slow it down. Instead of doing like a 0 to 10, maybe go from a 0 to 2.
Okay.
And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay. So that's interesting. I wanted to dive into this, but Rajiv is actually mentioning something really interesting here. And who is the biggest winner of the saga of this situation? Is it Meta? Is it another company? Or different competitors?
Well, yeah, we haven't seen much yet from Meta, I'd say. Like Google did their public large language model with Bard. I don't think it's caught on. I only think
No.
I've used it the week they announced it. I haven't seen any people post about it. I haven't seen anything in particular with Meta yet, but for sure they're doing developments. So it's curious to see. I don't have an insight on what's happening in the minds of these VC funds and where the investments and developments are going. But Elon, Zuckerberg, they're all big players also in the AI space. So who's the real winner? I don't know.
Okay. The mention is llama too. So
Oh, okay, right.
so that
Thanks
will
for
be
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
So okay,
So
to cap this story off, um, are you familiar with how hard it is to find people for the board of companies?
I've heard stories, but I think you have a better angle at it. Especially, I'm not sure how it translates for a smaller segment versus something on a global scale like this. But do enlighten us on
So
how the board kind of is being established.
so I think one of the most difficult things is that you have to build rapport. You have to become known in the space to be trusted to become a board member of any kind of organization. And that's not really easy because either you need a big network or you need to have a proven track record. So what often happens is that, especially in the boards of big companies, you see a lot of reoccurring names
Yeah, that's something I have noticed as well. Yes.
because the pool just isn't that big. Because to be appointed as a board member, there are certain rules and regulations. You have to uh, meet certain criterias, and a lot of people don't meet one of those criterias. So you kind of, at a certain point, are going through the same pool. You go like, oh, this person has been a board member in that and that and that company, so let's appoint this person as part of the board. Or another thing that a lot of people don't know is that boards for different companies, it's not like, because that's what, like, for instance, conspiracy theories think like, oh, it's that kind of family from that person, and that person used to be the president, so it's a nephew. No, it's not necessarily that. And hopefully in most cases it isn't. In most cases, it's the fact that When you appoint a new board member, you are looking for a certain skill. So whenever you like, okay, we want to invest the next 3 to 5 years in merging with one of our biggest competitors, like that could be like a strategy for a company. Like we want to merge,
S-
or we
So
want to
I
get bought
wanna,
out.
yeah,
Yeah,
I wanna pause you there. As you
yeah,
mentioned, you're looking for a particular skill,
yeah,
and I wanna, break this
yeah.
down for people listening as well and who aren't familiar with this. Board members aren't that are actually barely or not at all involved in the execution and operation of the company. They're just there for their strategic insight and most of the time their network to maybe closing deals
Yeah.
or getting investments. But the
They advise
operation side, they usually
the
don't
C-level
mingle
staff
in.
of
Yeah.
the company. They advise the C-level staff, in most cases just the CEO, but they advise the C-level staff of the company. And when they advise, they move pieces. So they get their foot in the door to make those opportunities possible. The CEO and the company still has to do all the operational work, like you mentioned. They still have to make the deals work, but the board is basically the one that gives strategic advice and opens up doors to make these opportunities possible. So when you're looking for a board member because you want to merge your company with a competitor in the next 3 years, or you want to buy out a company under you, or you want to be bought by a bigger company, you will look for a board member who will be able to give quality advice, who has done these kind of things multiple
Yeah,
times.
who can move the mountain.
If you're looking to fire 50% of your staff, you want somebody on your board who has experience with those kind of situations. If you want to truly innovate your products and take your product development and research and development to the next level, you want somebody on your board who is able to do that. Now, once you start realizing that, no, it's not just politics and only politics towards like friends and family, once you start realizing that it has very limited to do with that, you'll see that how strategic those choices are and how often somebody who is presumably good at something gets led into different kind of boards all the time. And unfortunately for shareholders, either they often don't have a choice, or they haven't done due diligence, or there is some political play in there where the majority shareholder wants a certain direction, which isn't always the direction that everybody agrees on. And those are kind of the situations that these companies get in where they do something against the public opinion and they don't realize how big the public opinion is, and they don't realize how much, either they don't realize how much of the staff and people working for the company don't agree, or they don't care about that in a situation where they should care. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that major corporations at the moment face, is that they're built for profit. And especially the corporations that need to maintain power. So if you're like a startup in the tech scene, you don't have that pressure. You don't have to take everything in a calculated risk. You can try something on the fly because you're on the up. But once you have to maintain your position and your status within the tech scene, then all of a sudden everybody comes risk averse. Everything is calculated, and you
And
get boring board members that
speaking of that risk, and I want to draw the spectrum. You mentioned startup, and then you have on the other spectrum, kind of the established players. And then as you grow into the spectrum, you add board members, you look for that expertise or that network of people who can move the mountain. So, what would you say is riskier when you start growing? Organically getting a board member that's kind of aligned with the vision and values of the company, or getting someone who kind of has the prestige but isn't a fit, or is kind of doesn't have the startup or company's best interest at heart, whereas they kind of maybe are busy with a competing company and they're also on the board of that,
Oh
because
wow,
it is a small pool of private
yeah,
elite club.
yeah. I think context matters in that sense. I couldn't answer that question because either one could be a good fit and either one could be a bad fit. So that's hard. What I do think is that what is being underestimated is the people aspect of the companies.
Mhm.
Like um, we're in generational change, and like 2, 3 generations ago, people used to be experts. Like they were really close knit, focused on one thing and maintaining one thing. Whereas now, you don't get the time to become an expert most of the time. You just get put in situations where things are way above your head because there is just a gap. Just because you need more skills now than you needed 40 years ago.
Can you repeat that? You don't get the time to become an expert because
You don't get the same amount of time you got to become an expert 40 years ago. Like people underestimate that. From an educational level, the education is more spread out. So that's where it starts. Then, from a personal level, how much time you have available for what. And like there are many factors that you have to take into account. But even in the biggest companies, there's a lot of change in staff. And I'm not sure how to put it. It's not as easy as people think to replace somebody who has been with a company for a decade. Even for 5 years. If you lose your employees that you've had over for more than 5 years in a company, the amount of information that they're taking away and are no longer within the company, even if there are procedures and everything is well documented, you don't get the same results. And especially when you go to a younger generation that has been brought up differently, has been educated differently, who has a different thinking process as well. Basically, that's where everything gets stuck. So at the moment, everybody is fighting, like the top layer of companies, they're all fighting to get the best employees. And if they steal them away from the biggest company, that company has to search for these employees again. So this company goes to a mid-level size companies and takes the best talent out. And the mid-level size companies go to the startup and take the best out. And the startup have to search over for their talent. And
oh,
only if people are loyal to the company, you get saved as a company. But otherwise, you lose manpower, but you also lose expertise, but you also lose a lot of knowledge and a lot of routine, which takes a couple of years to get back, or you don't get back and you get a faultier product than it previously was.
and that's why I also think it's quite important to you know reward them for what they deserve, and not just go bottom line, the business needs to make maximum profit, because at the end of the day they're helping run the business. And usually, with especially the newer generation, what tends to happen is they can more easily get a pay raise if they switch jobs every 2 to 3 years, versus kind of applying for a promotion or a raise within the company, because the other side, the other competitor, they are looking for that expertise, so they are willing to up the pay grade and take you. So that's kind of why the trend has also existed, that people, especially the younger generation, switches every 2 to 3 years from job or from company to company, maybe maintaining the
Yeah,
same role.
But then again, you don't have real expertise. So the new company also gets disappointed because you think there's a certain expertise there. But like I said, it's really hard now.
Yeah,
Just
and
look at it from an internal communications perspective. Like how many different intranets and software, communication software are within different companies? You have Microsoft based companies who run everything through Microsoft. Then you have Google based companies who run their complete intranet through Google. Then you have different project management softwares. Like in the end, it's all the same. Basically, they do the same thing, but it's not automatic that everything translates when you switch jobs. So you get into situations where people look at your CV and they're like, "Wow, you're really good at this." And then when they get into the job, you realize like, "Oh, wait, not just it's on their CV,
even
but
then,
it doesn't
I
necessarily
could
mean
argue differently, because if you're talking about certain skills, and obviously I'm not trying to put everything in one basket, but certain skills, as you mentioned before, you don't have the same time to develop the expertise. But on the flip side, there are new skills or expertises being developed that didn't exist 40 years ago. Whereas you
true,
need to
true.
a different skill set to kind of adapt and learn that at a much faster rate. Whereas
But there
fundamental
are also
knowledge is
people that are
transferable.
continuously learning. There are people that are continuously learning. They pick it up quite quick. But there are also CV builders. They don't
Yeah,
really pick it up.
exactly.
So you could have somebody think like, hey, this person built this. So that's why we're getting that person. And then you find out that that
And
person
I
didn't
would put
build it.
I would put that same parallel. You mentioned you
Yeah,
got the CV builders and the people who actually
yeah,
continue to learn and are able to pick something up really quickly, even though they switch. I think it's the same thing if we're looking at board members and the private club that's happening in the major tech space.
exactly.
You have the CV builders kind of uh, adding something to their badge to say, "Hey, I was at
I was a board
this
member
company
here.
for
I was a
six
board
months,
member there.
2 months
Yes.
there, 1 year there." So I think that's the same risk, but on a different scale.
And it seems wrong to say it because it's a double edged sword. So there's so many options right now. There's so many companies right now. So everything has multiplied. And it's really hard to see from the outside whether somebody is a good fit or not. It's like the whole reason why the Google internship is so extensive and people fall off and you have different weeks to find different skills is the reason why I prefer people that come to my company to do 2 weeks of just company culture before they touch a single task within the company. And then 2 weeks to see whether or not they really fit in the company and things that are being said during an introductory meeting are really part of their skill set. And then even having people in the company vote whether or not you should accept somebody. Like it's the ideal situation. We don't always get to do that, but that's something I would prefer because otherwise it's just like, okay, we need this. And that's basically my biggest concern is like right now the board of OpenAI is kind of saying like, hey, this is the direction we want to go. And then if the direction is wrong or the team isn't right or the team says screw this, we're not no longer part of it, the whole idea, the whole concept, the whole vision they had in mind never becomes a reality.
I kind of saw a similar, or not a similar, a someone made a comparison on, it's basically a fork, and I would bring this to Steam and Hive. It's kind of what's happened to Steam and Hive, whereas you have kind of a hostile takeover, and the majority, in this case the employees, aren't in agreement with it, so they've kind of follow uh, the leader they put aside. And
It's a
Who knows
little
where they end
different
up?
though.
But yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah.
little different
But
because
just a, you know,
you need to pay the salaries.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a
On a
little
on a
different.
on
Yeah.
a kind of similar analogy, but basically
But I understand
just goes to show
the fork
the fork
comparison,
analogy. Yeah,
definitely. So
and
and the same thing would have happened, for instance, if the founders of Instagram and WhatsApp were like, "Hey, we're gonna rebuild the platform without the commerce," which they won't do because they probably have a non-compete clause. So that's another thing that will be interesting is what kind of non-compete clauses does Sam have in this situation?
yeah, and I think one of the
Because I'm
things
pretty
that
sure there's some things within the contract that don't allow him to do certain things that could affect the
for sure
yeah.
these companies do like the legal things that they effort and payroll they put into it is kind of extensive, and especially if you're talking about billions of investments and kind of the knowledge and patents that are associated with it. So that's something Microsoft, if they, you know, acquire the employees, has to kind of deal with as well. But even from them, I think they also have strategic moves in place kind of prior to this. And on that note, I want to transition to the other headline that we've had, and I think you mentioned this one as well. What's the other headline we're talking about today?
So the other headline is kind of the first thing that popped up when I opened up Twitter, and that was a special announcement by CC from Binance that he stepped down as CEO of Binance. He introduced Richard Tang, who has a pretty good track record, who's not only been with he's the global head of regional markets, or was the global head of regional markets for Binance, but he also worked as CEO of the Financial Services Regulatory Authority at Abu Dhabi and the global market, and was the chief regulatory officer of the Singapore Stock Exchange before that as well, with a corporate background, finance, and also so basically Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and knows everything about regulations. Basically saying, guys, like, hey,
But
listen, yeah, saying
and
like,
here
hey, if
where
there's
I
like a
actually want to insert,
technicality,
yeah, here's where
yeah,
I want to insert the caveat.
yeah,
You mentioned like non-US markets, and the issue that CZ has is with the US market.
but
Basically,
still, this is a regulatory, so he's familiar with regulations. Like you won't be able to catch
yeah.
him on regulatory stuff. I think that's the message they're sending. That's the message they're sending to the world, not necessarily the US. They're sending the message to the world like, hey,
Who is sending the message?
rules,
Is it Binance or is it
Binance. I feel Binance is sending the message. I feel Binance is sending the message to the world like, hey, listen, the US can say whatever they want. Now, right now, we're putting a regulatory expert as our CEO. So trust me, our rules and regulations are knit tight, and everybody in the world should be assured that Binance knows its regulations and its rules. Basically, that's what they're saying.
because you may have seen the headline about Binance CZ stepping down, but simultaneously to that, Kraken has been brought to court about selling
Oh,
unregistered securities.
oh,
Bittrex, today, this morning, I got an
oh,
email from Bittrex that they're officially closing their doors and people have 2 weeks to withdraw their
oh.
funds. So I'm happy I closed did this 2 years ago when I already had issues with Bittrex. So yeah, the US regulatory body is going after these exchanges. So it's not
They're
just
going
Binance.
every well,
Binance is basically the poster child of this attack.
yeah,
But
and it's gonna be a long attack because, of course, the first thing they did was Coinbase kind of closed like majority of the accounts of people living outside of the US.
yeah, and Coinbase is actually focusing solely on the US now and following all the regulatory steps that have been laid out.
Yeah,
And what this does actually is Coinbase has a advantage on the US ground because simultaneously in the past week, the big the big hedge funds like BlackRock and some others kind of filed ETFs for Bitcoin, and I think I definitely know from Bitcoin. I'm not sure if the Ether one got submitted or approved yet, but Bitcoin and the custodian for that or the partner in that would be Coinbase. So they have a vested interest to kind of comply with everything because they are kind of basically the whole investment of the world is kind of laid there before their in front of their doorsteps.
So it's interesting. It's interesting because we need, I think we need a new Berners-Lee.
A new what? Burner?
I think we need, just with the internet, we need somebody to step up um, that has no interest in anything political, anything geopolitical. And I think we need a, a guy like Tim Berners-Lee,
I'm actually
somebody who,
not familiar with him.
okay, Tim Berners-Lee basically is known as the computer scientist who invented the World Wide Web.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Let,
got
let
it.
me let me let me explain
Sir
for a
Timothy
second.
John Berners-Lee. Yes.
Yeah. So Tim Bial basically is the one that made sure that there was one specific kind of code for the whole internet, and that every website in the world basically runs on the same code. And he was a Brit working at CERN in Switzerland, so you can pretty much not get more neutral than that. And he made it possible that there was one code because before Tim Berners-Lee, you have of course had the
Yeah.
military program from the U.S. Um, but you also had different the ARPANET from the US, but you also had different other uh, countries already working on their own internet. So the US had the information superhighway, the uh, uh, Germany had something like the Infobahn or something like that, which are kind of like the internet highway, similar. Italy had their own thing. I think Japan was for along. So basically, all these countries were kind of having their own
Independent, yeah.
internet, independent internet. And if it wasn't for TNVL, basically your government would decide what kind of internet you would have, which still
Basically
is the
what
case for
Cuba.
some
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
Some countries still have. So China has that to some extent. Cuba still has it. A lot of left uh, communistic countries still have that kind of situation. But for the majority of the world, the internet is open. So what people have to realize now that we're getting into the regulatory stages of cryptocurrencies where both nation states and banks are going to be like, hey, if we want to make this mainstream, you're going to have to comply to certain rules. And know your customer is not enough. We want to make sure that we can follow the money. And we want to control this thing, which is the exact opposite what what Bitcoin was made for. So you get into this tension situation where you either comply to regulations and you kind of lose certain amount of control because trust me, like countries like the Netherlands already have complete tax brackets on your crypto earnings.
Mm-hmm.
So either you're gonna follow the rules, it's gonna become mainstream, but you're gonna have to show your books to your government, or at least the government where you're cashing out, or you become this vigilante who works outside of the trusted system, which means you're on your own.
Trusted system or
The trusted system, the
yeah.
trusted system. But basically, you're on your own because if you lose your Bitcoin wallet, if you lose your Satoshis, you don't have a company to go back to. You don't have a bank to go back to. You don't have an exchange to go back to. You don't have anybody to go back to. So you're in the Wild West. Somebody can come, shut you down, and you don't have any insurance or anything to get it back. So basically, they're kind of putting people in a situation where it's like, hey, you can do the mainstream crypto route where
It's
you're
a
like
risk spectrum.
you're connected to a bank or connected to a trusted third party that carries your money, and if something happens, you can hold them responsible, and they can go bankrupt, and you get upset with them, or you can hold it by yourself. You have your own keys, you have your own
And
wallets,
if you lose
but
that, you
hey,
get upset
if
with yourself.
somebody, yeah, if somebody robs you, it's your own fault. And yeah, welcome to the regulatory crypto world of crypto. It's not gonna be fun.
It's not, but I'm actually looking forward to it because this just shows years ago the conversation was different. Is it really a thing? But because these steps are being taken, it's kind of already a signal that it's kind of been accepted. They can't circumvent it, so they need to place
Oh yeah,
guardrails.
but the tragedies are gonna be bigger. The tragedies are gonna be much bigger now.
I think they're gonna be more public. Same thing with social media. Strategies always
They were
existed.
there. They were there. Yeah,
Yeah,
true.
they were there, but they weren't visible to most people. And with the rise of social media and with the rise of traceability, especially with the blockchain and tracking everything, things come to light more broadly. So they're going to become more visible. So I don't think the strategies are going to be bigger. They're just going to be more exposed. And you might see them more frequent. I think that's just the nature of the development. So, with that being said, are you still going to use Binance after CC stepped down?
Well, the bigger question is, are you gonna be able to cash out?
I'm not worried about that.
I'm worried about that in the sense that you want to be able, just like you have a trusted partner, that you can switch to certain currencies, like fiat currencies. You want to be able to switch between crypto and fiat. And for the
It's
simple reason that you cannot pay with the same currency anywhere. That's something that
that's
people don't understand.
I agree
And
with
that's,
that to a certain
yeah,
degree, but I do
yeah,
believe over time the solution will flow and there's going to be a consensus for people because at the end of the day, money, we had a dedicated episode on money. What is money?
yeah.
Is a tool to exchange value. And there's going to be a consensus
Okay, but
to reach that. But the
if your
timeline,
consensus a
this
year,
is the
if your
risk that
consensus, no, no,
I
no.
I
If the
I, I
consensus a
wanna
year
I
ago, okay,
want
go
to
ahead, finish.
the risk, and we've talked about risk in different scenarios, in different settings here, board, etc. Risk, I think addressing, assessing, and taking risk is a skill that any one person should learn. And the risk in what time horizon you're comfortable with that is something you need to be able to decide for yourself. That's my
True.
statement.
But then again, a year ago, some people, thousands of people, had the consensus that FTX was a good place to put their money.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
listen,
yeah. I
listen.
agree. I agree. Yeah,
You can
I
tell me
see where
whatever
you're
you want.
going.
So,
I see where you're going. But
these
again,
are things that,
yeah,
and the unfortunate thing is, the well-educated and often the richer people benefit from poor decisions being made. by poor people and uneducated people. And the idea that Bitcoin was going to change the world, for me, in that sense, is failing. And that's for me the bottom line. That the real innovation and transformation is unfortunately fading.
I totally understand that, and I think I'm gonna leave the viewers or listeners with one question: is do you agree with the developments, the innovations that's in front of us right now, and how are you educating yourself to not fall behind? That's what I want to leave you guys with. So I think this was a very interesting episode. We covered two kind of headlines that happened this past weekend, and we tried to cover it in such a way that kind of we took the lessons from it, kind of analyzed it from the different approaches and how things are structured. So hopefully you got something out of that. It's always fun to dissect these situations and how people think and how it might impact you. But with that being said, this was another episode of Social Confoes. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Confoes. Uh, Like our Instagram, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. Any final thoughts, announcements, Jean-Luc? And then you can roll us out.
Yes, I agree. It was a really interesting episode. I want to thank people for tuning in, watching, and remember, we talked about technicalities. There are a lot of technicalities, but it's no, there's no reason not to continue to keep educating yourself and understanding better how this works. With that being said, this was Social Confoes. See you again next week, same place, same time. We're gonna say bye bye.
Bye.